Rising wholesale gas prices are causing a real crisis for the UK energy market, with average household bills expected to rise from 1,100 last year in upwards to the region of 3,000, 4,000, even 5,000 a year it's been forecast. In this video we'll look at solutions to how to deal with this crisis and avoid some of the social and economic damage that it will cause. We'll also look at long-term solutions that can help reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and avoid this situation in the future. But the pressing need is how to deal with the crisis this winter. And first of all, it's really important to understand the depth of the problem. It's estimated that low-income households would see the amount of income that they spend on energy rise from 7% of their income to 24% of their income. And this indicates really how unaffordable it is and how many just simply won't be able to pay. And also, it's not just households which will be affected by rising energy prices. It's also schools, charities and business. And there could be real economic damage if these energy prices go through, because businesses themselves are facing huge rises in costs. The FT looked at some firms which are seeing a 7-fold increase in the quoted price of electricity, making it unaffordable to put out certain businesses. And also, with households having this huge squeeze, that they won't be able to spend as much money on hospitality and entertainment. So business this winter could see a dual problem: rising costs and falling demand, because households simply can't afford the same amount of goods and services. And even on its own, the energy crisis would be a real problem. But of course, other prices are rising too. Inflation today rose to over 10%, and the Bank of England's forecast of 13% is really an underestimate. It looks very optimistic already. So we've got record-breaking inflation, but wages are not keeping up. Real wages are falling at their fastest level for many years, falling by 3% in real terms. So not only are prices going up, but people can't afford it. And those on low incomes are facing a relatively higher inflation rate because more of their income goes on energy. So if we don't do something about the energy crisis, it's likely to cause a very deep recession, a rise in unemployment, businesses failing, households struggling to pay their bills, landlords not getting paid, eviction notices being given, and it would create social disorder. So what to do about it? This is a big question. And the government started by offering a direct income support to every household of £400, rising up to £1,200 for low-income households. This is a start, but it's only a small percentage of proposed price increases, and it's not enough to tide people over. Also, it gives quite a lot of money, because the total cost is £11 billion, to households who don't need it. The top 20% will not be affected by fuel poverty. One good advantage of direct income support is that it retains a price incentive to reduce demand. And this is part of a solution to the energy crisis we have and environmental problems. We do need to find ways to reduce demand, to insulate the homes better, to find energy efficiencies, and to cut out unnecessary use. Now, having said that, I feel it's important to bear in mind that this incentive effect is outweighed by the magnitude of the increase, because there's only so much that low-income households can reduce demand without turning off the heating completely. Now, it's worth seeing this as a temporary crisis, something like COVID or a deep recession. And therefore, in this case, there is scope for a degree of government borrowing to deal with a short-term crisis. Also, you could maybe support the either price caps or direct income subsidies through windfall taxes on gas and electricity companies, producers, not really suppliers, and possibly banks who are making quite a lot of profit from the rising interest rates. But in the long term, we can't, if this price increases remain, we can't solve a problem through government borrowing. It can only be a temporary issue Recently, Gordon Brown proposed that if energy suppliers can't reduce prices sufficiently, they should be nationalised, at least temporarily. And it's worth bearing in mind that the profit of energy suppliers is high, but as an overall share of the industry, it's actually quite small. The most profitable energy supplier, SSE, made around £1 billion profit, which is quite a lot, but also it's worth bearing in mind a lot of companies, energy suppliers, went out of business. 30 companies went out of business because it wasn't a profitable market at the time. And there's only so much prices we could reduce by squeezing the profit of energy suppliers. Most of the profit in the industry comes from producing it and refining it. To put it into context, big five fossil fuel producers like Esso, Shell, BP, Chevron, ExxonMobil made profits of £100 billion in the first 6 months of 2022. If you're looking for a windfall tax on energy firms, it needs to be the big producers rather than the companies supplying in the retail market. One difficulty is multinationals are quite good at hiding their operations from high tax countries. So, for example, BP or Shell, they make a lot of profit refining in areas which are not subject to UK tax. But it does highlight the benefit of nationalisation. If you look at, say, Norway, the state-owned Norwegian energy companies have made huge profits for the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is over $1 trillion. And that goes to the whole country, which can be used how they want to. Whereas in the UK, we privatised BP in the 1980s. So the profit goes to shareholders and not the average household. So it's very tempting to put a huge windfall tax on energy producers when you look at the profits they're making. In evaluation, they may claim they made a loss in 2020 when oil prices were negative. Also, they may say if the windfall tax is too high, it will discourage investment in renewable energy, which is something that we need. And also, it's hard to tax the really profitable producers which are not operating in the UK, or at least not for tax purposes. What about the Labour Party's proposal, and I think Lib Dem have very similar policies too, to have a price cap to avoid any price rises in October and January? Usually as an economist, I would dislike the idea of a price cap because I like the idea of incentivising reducing energy use, not just for economic reasons, but also environmental reasons. However, I do feel that this winter is exceptional. The price rises are really unmanageable and will cause this economic distress for both business and households. So I think that rather rarely, I think there is a case for price capping, even though the sums are quite staggering. Of the cost of capping prices is around £40 billion. And I believe the Labour Party said this will be financed by windfall taxes and closing loopholes. One concern of it is that how long will this price cap need to last? Will energy prices go back to what you might call normal levels in the next 6 months? And there's quite a strong likelihood that they won't, because the gas and oil prices will take time to come down, because firms are not so keen to invest in fossil fuels when we've kind of reached peak oil and many economies are trying to transition to renewable energies. In the long term, we need to also consider other policies, such as insulating every home much better. And this is something the government could justify to fund directly, because it would help reduce bills, help reduce fuel poverty, and it would pay for itself over several years. And the government could justify borrowing to invest in insulation. It would also help meet our environmental goals. What about tax cuts? Well, cutting income tax and national insurance would increase disposable income of workers, and that would help increase their disposable income to pay the bills. However, tax cuts don't directly go to those who most need it, those on benefits and pensions, who would not see any increase. So you would need to compensate that through benefit support directly. My personal preference to solve this crisis is a mixture of price caps and direct income support directed to those who most need it. Usually I would avoid having price caps, but I feel that if prices are rising to £4,000 or £5,000 a year, then it would be devastating for households and business. And it's too hard to give the income support direct to every business that needs it, because small and medium businesses will be hit hardest. So rather reluctantly, I feel that the government may have to step in and limit price increases, at least to some extent, and help households, especially those on low incomes, with direct income support to make sure that they don't enter into fuel poverty. But there also has to be these other changes to reduce energy use, increase insulation, encourage more energy efficiency as much as possible, and in the long term to diversify away from fossil fuels as quickly as possible for both environmental reasons and to avoid this situation where we're subject to the whims of powerful petrostates who like to manipulate prices against the interests of Western countries. If you like this video, I think you'll like one I made on why the UK is heading into recession. I tried to make it a balanced, nuanced opinion on the UK's prospect. Since I made it a few days ago, the situation's already deteriorated. Inflation's gone up from 9% to 10%, and real wages have fallen by more. So after a few days, it's already starting to look a little outdated. But the general principle of why the UK is heading to recession is really good to have a look at. So I do recommend that video. Thank you.